everybody. Welcome to episode 6 of the Retro Wrestling Review Podcast. I'm your host, Gene Jackson, and today we have a very special episode for a number of reasons. It's one of the ones I've been looking forward to off in the distance since we started 1993, and here we are. But beyond the original reason I was excited about this episode, I got another reason to be excited. Of course, sadly, my normal co-host, the P3 radio guys, Josh and Richard, they are still away on assignment, we'll say, for lack of a better word. But we have found a more than suitable guest co-host, and it's my pleasure to introduce him right now. Of course, you know, we are part of the WrestleCopia brand, so what's more appropriate than having Mr. Ray Russell here as my guest co-host. Ray, how you doing, man?
What's going on, Gene?
A whole lot. Let me tell you something. When I started this 1993 USWA project, I immediately started skimming down the line like, when's Doink show up? When's Doink? That's the end of the episode. And so for people who listened and watched last week's episode with me and Brian Trammell, which we had a lot of fun, Brian is a friend of our mutual friend and WrestleCopia guest host, Jamie Ward. And originally, Jamie Ward was slated to be here with us. Jamie had something come up that was unavoidable, and he couldn't be here with us. So we're going to forge ahead without him. But we'll have Jamie on down the road. Never you worry. This is, like I say, this is WrestleCopia. So somewhere along the way, we're going to fit Jamie in. But before
maybe Jamie's here right now, and it's all an illusion that we can't see him.
We may turn a corner and slip on a banana peel that Jamie set down for us. But, you know, before we get going here, you know, you are the curator of WrestleCopia, and, you know, you got a lot of fine podcasts going over there. But this is not your first foray into 1993 USWA. So tell everybody a little bit about where you've dabbled in it before, and kind of what you think of this episode.
Oh yeah, man. Sure. The granddaddy of them all here at WrestleCopia is the Wrestling Memory Grenade podcast. And once upon a time, I was trying to do my old co-host a solid and cover 1993 WWF. Well, he split town midway through the project, but not before we got deep into Doink the Clown, who really appeared in, I think it was Halloween, October 31st, 1992 was his first appearance in the crowd. How's that for a good memory? Yeah. And then, of course, he's going to eventually attack Crush in January of 93. So he finally gets the name Doink. And, you know, obviously Matt Borne, an amazing character in Doink. But yeah, going back, we did 1993. I did it from beginning to end, the very first episode of Raw. I mean, hell, the last episode of Primetime all the way through December of 93. And most of the way, they were doing crossover stuff. Jarrett was working for Vince. You know, a lot, if you believe who the stories out there, he was being pegged to replace Vince for a while, should Vince have to go to prison during that steroid trial and all that good stuff. So it's, it was a fun time. I said, you know what, if I'm going to do this, I might as well go over here and do the crossover stuff. I read about it in the magazines growing up, and I always wanted to see it. And obviously the video footage is out there now. It's on your YouTube as well. And yeah, it was a good time, man, going back and learning, you know, week to week, everything that was going on, everybody that came through there. And I know Mr. Perfect works Jerry Lawler, I believe it was, and on a Mid-South Coliseum show. But Doink, I think, was the first WWFer to pop up on Memphis TV, if I'm not mistaken. And really, I mean, boy, did they take advantage of Doink on loan.
Man, let me tell you. So we weren't going to jump ahead and spoil the whole show, but I will say this: if the WWF had continued to use Doink the way he was used on this episode of the USWA, I think, and also obviously if Matt Borne would have played ball and stuck around, that character could have had a lot more longevity and been higher up the card than what he was, because I mean, they used him to perfection on the show. Now, some people, maybe it's going to be a little too much for him. He's out in nearly every segment, but I'm not mad at it. It works on a number of levels. And
I feel like somebody higher up got wind of that, and they said, okay, you can have our talent, but maybe not, don't use him in every segment, because you notice it kind of trims down after this week. Doink's, like you said, pretty much in every segment, or it feels like that anyway.
It feels like it. I mean, you'd be hard pressed to name more than one that he's not in. But like I say, he's used very well, and so I'm excited to get into this one. So hey, let's get going. So here we are. This is week 6 of January, or I'm sorry, week 6. We're moving into February, I should say, here in the USWA. And Dave Brown and Corey Maclin welcome us to another big episode of USWA Championship Wrestling, and they promise we'll see the King in action, along with many others, including Doink the Clown. And when we return from break, we'll get to our opening match, which is going to be the Unified World Champion, the King, Jerry Lawler. Now, they don't address it here, but obviously, since Jerry Lawler is still Unified World Champion, if we weren't at the Coliseum last week, we realized, okay, he retained against Mr. Perfect one way or another. So that kind of answers that question. But we're going to take a quick look here at the King's match. Just a couple of quick highlights. Basically, Lawler hits a big backdrop, a DDT, and spends most of the rest of the short match trying to get the mask off the little shadow. And before he finally hits his classic fist drop for the win. But we're not really here for that. We want to see the post-match shenanigans with Brian Christopher and the man we've mentioned. Like I say, we get right to it here in this first segment. So let's take a couple of quick highlights of Lawler's match, and let's see what old Doink's going to be up to get us started here on this episode of USWA.
Sounds good.
Underway on USWA Championship Wrestling today. And with a crown and the robe, climbs into the ring. His opponent is already there in the form of the Shadow. Referee Frank Burrell. Out of Memphis, Tennessee, the Unified World Heavyweight Champion at 4 DDT that flips the Shadow over. The King was taking requests. He said, hey, how about a DDT? The crowd says, yeah, so he responded. Shadow in the middle of the ring. Lawler's up on the middle rope. Comes down. Oh, boy, he blasted that Shadow. 1, 2, 3. Got him. 1, 2. Hey, King. Hey, King. Hey, Jerry Lawler, King. I'm sick of you running your mouth about. Oh, look out. Yeah. Here comes. Come on. He seems to be in a real good mood. Doink the Clown. Out in the wrestling area. You can just, sort of barely saw him there over on the left-hand side of the screen. Doink the Clown here. He hangs on and goes under and out of there. Lawler running after Christopher. Oh, my goodness. Look at all. Yeah. On the floor over here. And now Christopher and the Clown jump Lawler. Yeah. The Clown put a bunch of banana peels in the corner when he was out here. And Lawler slipped on it coming around. And now it is 2 against 1. Christopher and Doink the Clown against Lawler. Yeah, they jump on the King in there. After Lawler slipped up on those bananas that Doink the Clown was peeling out here. Banana peelings and all, Christopher and the Clown jump on Lawler. Here comes Chef Jarrett, though. And there goes Christopher and Doink. When Doink the Clown came out, he didn't want to get in the ring. Yes, can you see those banana peels over there? That's what.
Jumping on the King in there.
Brian Christopher. God bless Corey Maclin.
The way, that for years, every time I would say his name, I'd go, Brian Christopher, because the way he was just like you said it right there. But
yeah, my cousin loved that. We used to watch it all the time, and that was my Corey. If I went to a Corey impression, it would be Brian Christopher's name. But a couple of takeaways for me here, Gene, if you don't mind, is how Memphis-y is slipping on a banana peel. I mean, it's like perfect for the studio there, right?
I mean, exactly. And it's like, somebody sat down like, okay, we've got a clown. What kind of shenanigans would a clown pull? Well, he would probably put banana peels on the floor and make somebody slip and fall in them. My first takeaway before we get there, has there ever been a more aptly named wrestler than the Shadow? Because he literally looks like the shadow of any wrestler he's standing across in the ring.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect.
You got
perfect outfit.
Any backstory as to who that is? You're pretty good at this, so I'm curious.
I have always believed that was Kevin Christian, a.k.a. Kevin Lawler.
Okay.
Who's because size wise and you never see Kevin Christian refereeing a shadow match.
Okay.
So I
Fair
just
enough.
assumed that. Now I'm currently trying to negotiate getting Kevin on here for an interview. We can't seem to nail down a time, so I'm going to confirm that once I talk to him. But now the only thing that threw a monkey wrench in that for me was I seen a couple of Paul Neighbors' son, referee Paul Neighbors' son, who does a lot of posting on Facebook. He follows our Retro Wrestling Review Facebook page and shares a lot of stuff, and we share it on the page. He shared some booking sheets that had the shadow, and it had a different name next to it. It wasn't Kevin's name, and it wasn't a name I recognized. So that completely threw me for a loop. So I don't know. So I plan to, even if I can't get Kevin on the show, I'm going to try to pin him down and get him like, all right, Kevin, were you the shadow? I'm pretty sure he was.
Brother.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he was down the line, at least in later years. But I just assumed it was him here because I've been paying attention. And every time the Shadow has wrestled on that same episode, Kevin Christian has refereed almost all the matches. But for that match, at least, Frank Morrell would be out there refereeing and Kevin wouldn't. I'm like, So,
well, before we get into Doink, just two more quick takeaways here. You talk about referees, Frank Morrell, my God. And it goes on for quite a few more years as well. I remember him doing some USWA stuff on ESPN. And again, go back to my cousin. She would be over after school and they would have him down there reffing sometimes. And we would sit there, didn't know what a Frank Morrell was in that time frame. So we were just making fun of the referee back in the late 80s or 1990, whatever it was. And B, your highlights there, Jerry Lawler, shame on you using a DDT as a transition move.
I know, right? That's why I had to include that in there, because I've been watching Jerry Lawler matches my entire life, and I don't know that I've ever seen Jerry Lawler really use a DDT, and at least of all in a random TV match like that as a transition move. So yeah, that was quite surprising. That's why it made it into the highlights for me there. So Brian comes out as he's been known to do here in recent weeks, as he's coming out each week and he's smack talking the King. But obviously, as he's trying to get the King distracted, we see Doink saunter out there, and he's got a bag in his hand. And they kind of get enough of it, just enough of it on camera. You kind of get the idea, like, all right, he's doing something over there. Finally, after quite a bit of goading, Brian finally gets the King to chase him around the ring. He comes around the corner. Brian jumps over the banana peels. Lawler hits him, wipes out. They attack him. But as you pointed out, such a Memphis-y thing to do, such a classic, like generic, like, what would a clown do? Well, he put banana peels on the floor. But it works, man, because it's the basics of that character, because that is the question. If a clown was a bad guy wrestler, what would he do? He'd do silly shit like this. So it's, I mean, to me,
he's
it's
an evil clown
Doink here. Yeah, it's classic Doink, and it fits perfect as far as I'm concerned. And then him peeking his head through the curtain there at the end.
Those are great. I love those visuals. Like, those are great, like, video stills to use, because just awesome shit with his head peeking out like that.
And if we left it at that's a pretty good segment. But oh no, we're just getting started here, Ray, as you well know.
Segment number one.
Segment number one. So now we get Bert Prentice coming out, cuts his weekly promo on Bubba Johnson, aka Miss Texas. Last week he had the back alley street brawl with Miss Texas, which, again, if you didn't catch last week's episode for the explanation, inexplicably, and it's not just because it was these two, in other matches with like regular tag teams, a back alley street brawl in Memphis is like a Southern street fight meets a tuxedo match. You're in a street fight where the only way you can win is to strip the clothes off your opponent. And as I told Brian Trammell last week, I'm like, I don't care how big of a Miss Texas fan you are, you got to be cheering for Prentice here, because we want Miss Texas stripped. We don't want to see Bert Prentice get stripped. But apparently that's exactly what happened. Miss Texas stripped down Bert Prentice last week. He lost the back alley street brawl, and now he's out here sporting boxing gloves. saying that he's getting the match that he's always dreamed of. Last week, the match he'd always dreamed of was a back alley street brawl. Now he's been dreaming of having a boxing match with Miss Texas. Now, obviously, we've got a little clip of some of this action, too. Is there anything you want to comment on before we get there?
Nah, a couple of shoot comments in there. I'll leave it at that.
All right, let's take a look at a little bit of this action here with Bert Prentice and Miss Texas, a.k.a. Bubba Johnson. Boy, they've milked that joke for all it's worth.
Big Bubber.
Yeah. Come on, you're not going to come out here and try to embarrass me.
Embarrass you?
Yeah.
Like you coming out here, you embarrass your own self.
You slept with half of the wrestling promotion.
Will you stop that?
And then you want to come out here and say you're going to beat me?
You know,
I don't think so.
You jealous. You jealous of me. Yes.
I wouldn't want a body like that.
Well,
Look at that.
Look at that.
You wish you looked as good as me, you tramp. You're a two-bit tramp.
Myself.
Oh, really?
Oh, really?
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, really?
Hey, come on, boy, this Doink the Clown out here again. Look at it. He and Christopher out here with a pie and threw it in Miss Texas' face.
Oh, that's ridiculous. That is just ridiculous. Christopher, you all get out of here with that stuff. That's horrible, man.
Oh, goodness. Prentice just threw her down on the floor.
Oh, that's
All right,
ridiculous,
Bert.
Dave. That is horrible.
And look at Christopher and the Clown over here. Just celebrating the whole thing. Here comes Lawler, Jarrett, and that'll get rid of him.
Woo-wee.
Good grief.
That shot that she took bumped to the studio floor, man. That whole segment there, the end of that'll get you thrown off TV today.
Man, you ain't kidding. I mean, I'm guessing since, whatever took place last Monday night, we're like, all right, Bert's got to get some heat back. And, it's all fun and games. Doink throws a pie in her face, And again, if we're back there, if me and you were booking this show and we're sitting there before the show, like, all right, what else would the evil clown do? Like, well, he's got to throw a pie in somebody's face. Come on. That's just that's a layup right there. So we get the pie in the face and we're like, all right, there we go. No, like you say, that's the tip of the iceberg. Man, but he lays her out like, good grief, that's terrible. And then he goes down and he starts wailing. I mean, those look like some pretty stiff hammer throws, hammer blows right there on the floor. Yeah. It's like, good grief, dude. That's literally pretty stiff. So,
it was something else, man.
She's going to be motivated for this boxing match.
Boxing, yeah, maybe. Maybe Bert will get some payback. I don't really know how that's going to play out yet, but I got to tell you, dude, when I did the Grenade show and I covered 93, I was more focused on what Doink was doing. So I had completely forgotten how that segment ended until I went back and watched it for the show. And I was like, holy cow, it's like, oh, wow, that was amazing. But yeah, you're right. I was thinking the same thing. What do you do after banana peels? Well, you go to the pie.
Exactly. So I blended a couple of segments together there just for people who are following along. It actually was Bert come out and cut a promo with his boxing gloves. We go to a break. Miss Texas has now come out. She's trying to cut a promo in her boxing gloves and her cocktail dress. And then here comes Bert Prentice out there. We get what just happened. The only thing that I have to call into question here beyond, how that played out with Bert, we just did a gimmick boxing match last Monday night between Mike Samples and referee Paul Neighbors. And now we're already going to another boxing match this Monday night with Bert Prentice and Miss Texas. Like,
yeah, seems like whoever's booking right now, they only have hair versus hair matches, boxing. It's like kind of a repetitive thing to a degree.
Yeah. The old box of gimmicks must not have a lot of choices in it. They keep drawing out the same ones.
The milk's gone bad, Charlie Murphy.
Bert managed to work in the line. You've slept with half of the promotion before Dave Brown pulls the mic away and says, "Come on now, Prentice," which is exactly what Lance Russell would have said.
Come on now. Come on, Bert. We don't need none of that out here.
As I watched that, I could hear your voice doing your Lance impression. I was like, yes, the spirit of Lance is with us in Studio TV5 here. So
I should go back and redub all the USWA from while Lance was gone and try to entertain myself anyway. This is what Lance would have said.
We'll redub the commentary with you as Lance, and I'll do my best Corey impression, which I don't do as good a one as Richard does, but I try.
I heard that. That was good. I loved it. All these years I was proud of my Brian Christopher, but then he did that, and I was like, man.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, his is more of just a straight up impression. Like he could call somebody and be like, Corey Maclin just called me, which would be quite the trick if you know the rest of that story. Anyhow, so an interesting little side note here. I think this is like the second week this has happened. So Miss Texas just got laid out. Jerry Lawler and Jeff Jarrett come out to make the save, and they help her. You know, they get her up off the ground. She's covered in pie and everything.
Yeah.
And they take her through the curtain. So as that's happening, Mr. Clyde, favorite name on the roster right there, Mr. Clyde comes out.
Put a lot of thought into that one.
Yeah, we've had a lot of discussion about that. Jeff Jarrett goes through the curtain, and I guess just immediately, as soon as he goes through the curtain, he throws his ring robe on.
Jacket.
As he comes immediately back out in that jacket just to get out there and take the jacket.
Gotta get the jacket out, yeah. Gotta get it over, man.
It's like, yeah, man, he had to wear, and then Dave Brown even put over, oh, look at that ring jacket there that Jeff has on. It looks very nice.
It was made by Wrestling 2's wife. It wasn't a K&H special. I know that much.
Yeah. At a glance, it looked like a bunch of Post-it notes stuck to a jacket. It cut into strips.
Jeff always had a weird ensemble.
He did, man. For a baby face, just those tights and the pink boots and everything, it looked like such a heel thing to wear. And then that jacket with it, I'm like, this does not look like a baby face. But it's the 90s. I mean, we've seen Lawler wear some questionable stuff in recent weeks.
Sure, he looks like the intro to Saved by the Bell, man. It works for me.
Exactly. Yeah. So just folks, you got to remember, we're not in 1985 where me and Ray are usually hanging out watching Memphis wrestling. We have jumped up to 1993, and at times you can feel it.
There's still fruit. You know, we had watermelon in 85. Now we got bananas.
That's right. That's right.
At least they're eating healthy at WMC.
That's true. So there's not a lot to this match. Jeff puts Mr. Clyde away with this leaping DDT that we've been seeing him use lately that Richard has fun making fun of at times. But I don't think we need a clip of this match. Do you? Was there anything, a real highlight there that you think we're going to miss?
No, there was a low light, that leaping DDT, but that was pretty much it for me.
I've had quite a few people message me and, like, hey, man, y'all are kind of rough on Mr. Clyde. He's a really good guy, and he passed away of cancer. And I'm like, look, man, we're just having fun. Like, by all accounts, he's a super great guy. He was a good friend of Brian and Kevin Lawler and Scott Bowden. He did their backyard promotion when they were growing up, and that's how that was his entryway into USWA. So when we make fun of these things, we're not knocking the people. We're not trying to be jerks. We're just having fun. And I'm sorry if you can't see the humor in the name Mr. Clyde, I'm sure he did. That's why he eventually changed it and became Ali Ben Khan or whatever it was he was down the line. But Jeff gets the win, and afterwards, Brian Christopher returns to ringside to taunt him, Ray. I can't imagine how this is going to turn out, but let's take a look.
Jake, don't get out of that ring, boy. I'm sick of you talking about me. Hey, come here, Jeff. I'm ready to shut your mouth, boy.
Christopher back out here. He was yelling at Lawler earlier, challenging to come back in the ring, but Jeff started out, but he comes back and... What's the referee's? The referee is telling Christopher to get out of the ring and get out of here. Jeff Jarrett over talking to him and now talks to the ref.
Watch that
look out, that clown is back out here dancing around. Meanwhile, Jeff and Brian over in the corner, and the referee is trying to make sure that they don't get together there. What is he saying? Brian dancing around saying, come on, come on, come on, come on. And there goes Doink the Clown. Well, he's leaving again, but he left once before. Brian shoves him. That's going to get Jeff into the ring. He comes after him. And Brian Christopher now out of the ring. Here they go. He's running around the ring. Oh, my goodness gracious.
Hey, what is that?
Like an oil slick there. That's what. Look at that. Look under the ring there.
Yeah,
a bottle of oil. That goofy clown. When he was out here, we were watching Brian and Jeff. Looks like that Valdez was over here spilling oil. They got it in a corner here. There's a bottle right there.
Oil that Doink the Clown poured all over the floor here in the studio, and Jeff slid right on that oil. Doink the Clown.
Big chop. And look at the clown work Jeff Jarrett over. Wow, Christopher holds him up. Here comes Lawler.
Yeah, the king comes
boy,
in.
you know, they don't hang around long when it's 2 against 2.
No, they don't.
It's 2 against 1, and they're tough as they can be. Yes, it's an oil. It's oil. He poured oil all over the floor, King. That's exactly what happened out here. Let's.
Well, Doink strikes again.
Doink strikes again, indeed. So while Brian is distracting Jeff, Doink has poured Wesson cooking oil all over the floor. It almost bites him because when he comes out there to help Brian attack Jeff, he nearly wipes out on it himself. You see Doink goes skidding across. He has to regain
I was wondering how well thought out that was. He was putting oil on it. It's like not like Brian, Christopher, and Doink are immune to oil on the floor. What was the routine here? You're going to have Jeff run into it, but he's got to chase you through it first. Then, of course, Brian jumps back at him, and everybody's sliding everywhere.
Exactly. Dave Brown makes the comment, it looked like the Valdez had spilled out here. I had no idea that Exxon Valdez was carrying cooking oil on it. But so here's a fun.
I was going to give Dave Brown props real quick for pretending like he didn't see Doink pour oil out 6 feet in front of their announce desk. Oh, we were too busy watching the match over top of him not to realize that he was right in front of us pouring oil out.
That's what I was just about to say.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to
no, you're good. But I mean, at least he kind of acknowledged it, because I was going to say that about the banana peels too. Like, one little wrinkle in all this, Doink is doing all this directly in front of Dave and Corey, and they have to act like they don't. I mean, they literally have to look, like you said, over him to see what's going on with Brian and Lawler, and then Brian and Jarrett. But
yeah,
Dave did at least acknowledge, like, we were so distracted with what they were doing, we didn't even see he was over here pouring oil in the floor. Like, really, Dave? Like, okay. Because it's funny, because there's a guy who comes around there and grabs Brian's ring jacket. You kind of catch it if you're paying attention. He comes up and grabs Brian's ring jacket off the ropes and steps over where he had poured the oil out. So you think he could have gave Jeff a heads up, like, hey, buddy, don't do like Lawler did, because they're trying to get
they don't pay him enough down there in Memphis.
He's like, screw.
Aren't you the promoter's son? I ain't saying a word.
Yeah, with his fancy Corvette, you piece of shit. I hope he falls down. But yeah, so
Corvette with that jacket.
So Doink strikes again. So we're 3 segments in. We've seen banana peels. Lawler wipes out. We've seen a pie in Miss Texas's face. And now we've seen Wesson oil on the floor, and Jeff Jarrett has wiped out. So Doink is 3 for 3 so far today, and he's building up some heat for a potential match on Monday night. We'll have to see if he makes it onto the card, Ray. I would have to think there's a good chance he just might. But again,
I hope so at this point.
Classic Doink prank. I wish we were going to see more of Matt Borne as Doink in the USWA.
Oh, yeah.
He really fits in here, and this is really a place that he can showcase this character and get a lot out of it. So,
what could be more Memphis than a clown, pal? Send on the clown. Ha ha.
All right, so before we move to the next segment, we're going to take our first podcast commercial break, and then we'll be back to hear what the King has to say about all these shenanigans so far. So we'll be back.
This is Wrestling Nostalgia, the podcast that dives into wrestling history. Hey, wrestling fans, I'm Dave Dynasty, and if you enjoy podcasts that are knowledgeable and history-driven, then Wrestling Nostalgia is for you. With great guests and fun interviews, there are over 200 episodes in our archives. We chat with several first-time guests and often cover topics not discussed on other podcasts. Look up Wrestling Nostalgia on your favorite podcast platform and visit all of our links at linktree/WrestlePod. That is linktr.ee/RASSLEPOD. And remember, wherever you go, whatever you do, be good, be safe, and keep on growing.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Give Me Back My Pro Wrestling, the podcast that's based on the old school but can still help you find the good stuff from today. Jimmy Street and the Plastic Sheik, Jarrett, are the undisputed tag team champions of the wrestling podcast world. From thought-provoking topics to superstar interviews to action figure expertise. This team does it all. And all they ask is, give me back my pro wrestling. Every other Thursday, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Hey guys, this is Wolfie D from PG-13. Check out my podcast, Live and in Color with Wolfie D, every Monday at noon. We're talking Memphis, we're talking ECW, WCW, WWF, everywhere that I've been. We even have some great guests, some Hall of Famers on the show with us. Every Monday at noon, Live and in Color with Wolfie D.
Okay, so the King comes out and he addresses that, you know, Doink the Clown, we know where he's from, and, you know, he talks about, you know, not being treated well when he traveled up to the WWF, and not because he's from the USWA, but because he's Southern. And he refers to you jerks up north, Ray.
Damn Yankees.
And then he makes some terribly lame Southern jokes that he claims the wrestlers were saying to him, asking him if he rode a donkey up there and how long he's been wearing shoes. Right. Is that how you treat my people when we come up there, Ray? If I come up there to visit, is this the kind of shenanigans I'm going to have to put up with?
Not particularly. Not that I'm aware of. I don't have those connotations, but I don't know. You know, I'll tell you one time when I was a teenager, my cousin from like Bakersfield, California, came to visit me in Cleveland, Ohio, and I think she was expecting that. I'm like, in Cleveland? Like, what do they teach you people out there in California? It's like,
oh man, my ex-wife was from Cleveland, and I went with her up there to visit a couple of times, and I did not think that I sound Southern compared to most Southern people, but oh my God, everywhere we went, people made a spectacle of, oh my God, say this again, say what you just said, and I felt like a trained monkey or something. It was
say beans and taters.
And, yeah, and I've been paranoid about my Southern accent ever since. But so Lawler mentions that his friend Downtown Bruno, aka Harvey Wippleman, has been having some issues up there with a certain somebody. So we're going to hear a little bit from Lawler awesome. And his friend Downtown Bruno. Then we're going to hear what the guys had a problem with. So let's first listen to Lawler and Bruno, and we'll see what you have to say about that, and then we'll go from there.
Come on out here, Bruno-Mania! Bruno, I'm going to tell everybody about your problems that you had up there in the World Wrestling Federation with the Fink.
The Fink.
The Fink, that's right. There is a little scrawny, sawed-off ring announcer in the World Wrestling Federation by the name of Howard Finkel. Anybody ever heard of Howard Finkel? He's a little bald-headed ring announcer, thinks he's the greatest thing since sliced bread. The truth of the matter is, he's the biggest nothing since the invention of the zero. Is that right, Bruno?
Exactly. And some goofy Yankee like Howard Finkel going to try to make me look bad and feel bad up there? Well, I got news for him. He's not going to make me look bad in my hometown, not in Memphis, Tennessee.
Because that's where Bruno-Mania runs wild.
Bruno-Mania's running wild in Memphis, Tennessee. I want Howard Finkel to come on down and get in the ring with me.
Bruno-Mania, dude.
Bruno-Mania is running wild in Memphis, Tennessee, and I don't know, it's just so fun how they're so blatant with just the dislike for Yankees and Northern people and how the studio audience
is like, that's the feud, right? Yeah, we love it. All 17 of us.
So
I'm from Walls. He's cheating a little bit, Bruno. He ain't from Mempho. He's from Walls. In the trailer park. Had to go inside. The skeeters were biting him.
My wife came in the room when I was watching this, and she's like, wow, there was no question this show was shot in the South, was it? I was like, no, there was definitely not, because she walked in the middle of this promo, and Bruno's out there, oh, my people from Walls, Mississippi's going to be there. And it's like, good Lord. So I chopped that down. We're going to see a little more of the end of their promo, but from there, we talk about the fact that, you know, according to Lawler, that Bruno-Mania has been having a problem with a sawed-off runt of a ring announcer named Howard Finkel, the Fink, as he mentioned there. He gets a little more into detail, a little bit more insidery stuff, talking about how Lawler or how Finkel's one of the big wigs up there, and talking about what it's like when you call on the phone up there, and he'll put you on hold and won't return your calls and all this kind of stuff that most people are just like, what the hell is he talking about? Why would they call him the ring? Why would they call the ring announcer for WWF?
Yeah.
But anyway, what we're driving at here, believe it or not. So let's just take a step back here for just a minute, folks. And over the years, like, I used to get kind of offended when I would listen to shoot interviews and I'd hear some of these wrestlers who really weren't from, like, never really worked the Memphis territory, and they were the more northern guys and lifers from WWF, and they would make fun of Memphis and make fun of Southern wrestling, and and being a Southern fan, I kind of get upset about it. But when you analyze some things and you're like, all right, so last week's card featured a manager having a boxing match with a referee over whether or not they were going to have to pay fine. I mean, it's the most convoluted shit in the world, right? Like, they're having this boxing match, and if the babyface referee wins, then the heel manager has to pay both their fines. But if the heel manager wins, then the fines get wiped away. And then this week, we've already talked about, now we've got a manager boxing a female wrestler. And now we're about to have a WWF manager have a wrestling match with the most famous WWF ring announcer of all time. So let's hear what Howard Finkel has to say about this, and let's see if it seems he's taken kindly to all these insults towards the North.
Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce myself. Some of you may know me, and some of you may not. My name is Howard Finkel. I'm also known as The Fink, and I am the premier ring announcer in the World Wrestling Federation, the very best in wrestling today. As of late, I've been having a problem with a man I know as Wippleman, but apparently you people here in Memphis know as Downtown Bruno. My goodness, that has to be the stupidest name that I've ever heard. Who could walk around the streets of Memphis and call himself Downtown? Give the man a road map, he wouldn't know downtown from uptown. That's how dumb he is. I know that I'm going to have to come down from the Big Apple and fly down to Memphis, Tennessee this Monday night at the Mid-South Coliseum and step into the ring with Downtown Bruno. Give me a break.
Doing his best. Andy Kaufman even had a visual. It wasn't so app, but it was an apple. So I give him that much.
I mean, all right. So, you know as well as I do that, behind the scenes, Howard was the guy who watched all the footage. He watched, wrestling from every territory and kind of kept Vince and everybody in the loop of who was who and what was what and where. So, I mean, how much do you think Howard enjoyed getting to go down to Memphis and play a bad guy and in the realm of an Andy Kaufman type character? I mean, he had to be in heaven.
Absolutely. Rather than Hollywood, it was New York City. But Howard, it was probably his dream, his life dream. And, Vince let him do some comedy bits up there later on with Jericho. But, he did some crap with the Bushwhackers and with the Genius and Harvey up there. They did the tuxedo or whatever that was, those tuxedo matches, I think, on the house shows. It went on forever. But, down here, he gets to play the heel. I'm not going to call it serious, but in his world, he was probably being fairly serious and having a fun time. I think, I don't know Howard personally. I didn't know him, but I would have to think this was the greatest time of his life.
And so, folks, if you're just listening to this, watch the video version, because some people are going to listen to that promo and swear that was AI. But no, that was actually Howard Finkel in that promo. That was really him, and there's video to support that. And speaking of video, if you go on the YouTube channel and watch this entire USWA episode, I didn't include clips of it here because sometimes YouTube gets weird about, WWF clips and stuff like that. But in between Lawler and Bruno talking about Howard Finkel, they showed what felt like a very long clip of an incident in a WWF ring where Howard and Bruno gets into it, or I guess Howard and Harvey Wippleman along with Kamala and Kimchi. And Kamala ends up laying out Wippleman. I mean, Finkel,
Right. Yeah.
Nails him
This
with
was
a big
shot
splash.
specifically for Memphis.
Yeah. So here's what I'm driving at. I want to get your thoughts on this if you watch this close, because anybody who's ever listened to the Something to Wrestle podcast with Bruce Pritchard would have you believe there's never been a rib in WWF in history. Nothing they've ever done has ever been a rib. It's all been totally on the up and up and serious. So Howard Finkel gets splashed by Kamala. They roll him over and put him on a stretcher. And it's Bruce and Sergeant Slaughter and I think was Gerald Briscoe out there with him, I believe. I mean, it was a whole slew of them out there. They dump Howard off on his head off of the stretcher. Slaughter goes to like lean down over him. He grabs Howard right in the crotch, and they drag him back up on the stretcher. And you see Bruce covering his face, because this is just a rib on Howard. They're just screwed with him at this point, because they know they're shooting this for Memphis. Who gives a shit, you know?
Right.
And I thought it was very funny that obviously they're just, I mean, because it's, there's all kinds of notorious stories of all the ribs that was pulled on Howard over the years. You know, the car out in front of the Manhattan Center, you know, during the Raw and all that. So if you're not really paying attention, you know, you don't think much about it. But as I was watching that, I wound it back. I was like, wait a minute. I seen Bruce covering his face and everything, and you see Slaughter almost about to laugh. And I was like, look at him. I can't help but mess with Howard, but it's fun.
Yeah, it was like after hours videotaping, right? Yeah, you guys can air this if you want or don't. We really don't care. And in fact, Kamala was with them, and Kamala had already turned a while prior. So this was filmed. I can't remember when I covered this. It was like in the books for a little bit before they even used it here. And they were finally able to pull this out. And there it is, Kamala attacking Fink. And Fink gets carried out on the stretcher. Like you said, some fun shenanigans go on. But Fink being stretchered out of the arena there at the TV tape. It was like a Superstars taping or something like that. So it's kind of interesting to see a segment that was technically dark for the WWF, but it's airs elsewhere. And they use it, you know? That's pretty cool.
So they air Howard's promo, and Downtown Bruno gets a little bit fired up. So let's hear a quick response of BRUNO-MANIA from Howard's promo that he just cut.
Let me tell you something, Dave Brown. Look here. First of all, Howard Finkel, I'm proud to be a redneck. But see one thing, a redneck is a man. You're not a redneck. You are white trash. When I get you in that ring in Memphis, Tennessee, everybody from Memphis, everybody from the Mid-South area, everybody from Wiles, Mississippi is going to come down and see this redneck show you, Yankee white trash, what you are, a piece of garbage. And I got one more thing to say, Dave. You might think you're bad. You will be bad when Downtown Bruno gets through with you. That means beaten, annihilated, and destroyed. And you know why? Because it's like Mama says, it bees that way. Sometimes, oh yeah.
Pythons, baby.
I'll tell you what, I'm gonna get a hold of you right here. I may not have pythons, but I got me a couple earthworms here. They're gonna wring the life out of your Yankee neck, Daddy. Believe me, I'll be there.
Just like somebody said, Howard Finkel, the last guy that came down here and talked like that was Andy Kaufman. And you know what happened to him, is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, you gave him cancer with those pile drivers.
If Tux Newman is to be believed, that is exactly what happened, Ray.
And Eddie Gilbert and everybody else.
Eddie Gilbert and any number of people over the years. But yeah, we had to get that earthworms line in there, brother. That's good stuff. So it's happening one-on-one. Downtown Bruno, Harvey Wippleman, Howard Finkel.
Howard Finkel, white trash. He's not cool like Quang or well done.
It's got to be the first time in Howard's life he ever got called white trash, I'm quite sure, by a guy from Wild, Mississippi. Boy, that's one of those pot and kettle situations, no doubt.
Bertha fails, straighten him out, man.
So much fun stuff with Bruno over the years. I'm looking forward to meeting him in Jonesboro at this Legends of Memphis shindig up there. It should be fun. So now Corey Maclin runs down what's going on around the area. Lots of appearances from the Honky Tonk Man being advertised, despite the fact that he's only appeared once on television and never on any of the Mid-South Coliseum shows. Although they teased him to potentially, or Jeff Jarrett teased that he could have potentially been the Rock and Roll Phantom last week, but no, that wasn't the Rock and Roll. Anybody who laid eyes on the Rock and Roll Phantom immediately knew who the Rock and Roll Phantom was, and it was not the Honky Tonk Man, unfortunately.
Seems like I've seen that guy under a different mask somewhere.
Holy cow, you've seen that guy under... I mean, I know I've said this on regional wrestling quite a few times, but folks, take my word. If you ever find yourself in a Memphis trivia situation and the question is who was under a mask in Memphis, Don Bass and Roger Smith will get you the right answer 9 times out of 10, just about. I guarantee you. So
absolutely.
If you don't know, throw them names out there. You're probably going to get it right. So, so after the break, Dave Brown welcomes Richard Lee for his weekly rant about Mike Samples and the Bruise Brothers as the USWA tag team titles continue to ping pong back and forth between the Bruise Brothers and the Moondogs. And Lee mentions that this week it's going to be a 6-man tag team match with he and Samples teaming with their respective tag teams, and the manager's hair will be on the line. And it's like we said earlier, man, it's like there's so many stipulations and gimmicks that are out there, but man, Memphis is going to the well on boxing and hair matches.
Yeah.
Brian Christopher just had hair matches like 8 weeks in a row, where he put up everybody on every heel on the roster's hair against Jeff Jarrett, and now we're already going back to that here. But I mean, at the same time as well, how many weeks into the Harris brothers versus the Moondogs are we? I mean, like this feud.
Right.
I mean, we're in February '93, and this started back in November, December of '92. Like we're milking this for all it's worth.
It's like 4 years in Memphis years, dog years.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, because when you're doing weekly shows, then people are coming buying a ticket on Monday nights, and they just keep seeing variations of this match. Of course, now we've got a new and improved Moondog, Splat of all things.
Splat.
That's one of the worst Moondog names they've ever come up with. I liked Cujo, Rex, Spike, Splat. Really?
Yeah. We had a show coming up here, the old Aragon Ballroom. It was local commercials we used to get, and I had no idea what a Moondog Splat was, but this was over 30 years ago, and I still remember that name, Howard the Animal Steel versus Moondog Splat. I still remember this commercial more than 30 years later. Amazing. I don't know who Howard the Animal Steel was either, but it was like, wow, what are they doing here?
Yeah, especially you take those two names with no context at all. Like, did they?
This is what you're advertising in your commercial that you paid for to put on TV.
This is what's supposed to inspire me to buy a ticket. Howard the Animal Steel. So I don't think we're going to do a clip of this either, but. So, Ray, are all Moondog matches now just considered to be under Moondog rules? Because we're out here just beating these enhancement guys with chairs in the ring during the match. We're not calling for a DQ yet. We're getting DQs in other TV matches. Right. So it's not just ECW. It's not the Wild West where it's just no DQ. But, I mean.
I watched the match. I mean, you got me. I guess so.
As I pointed out in other podcasts with you, I know I nitpick a little too much, but I think that's not too much to ask. Just a little.
No, I think people later on would go, "What's the big deal?" Obviously, after ECW came, and even WWE eventually adapted that for a while too, where people just started using weapons and it was legal, and it just went on for a while. But that was during that period. But you're right. If you put it in context, 1993, and you just watch somebody walk in the ring and smash somebody with a chair as the match continues on. Yeah, everybody's raising their eyebrow like, shouldn't that have been a disqualification?
But like I said, I think we've gotten pretty familiar with these Moondog squashes by now, so I don't think we need a clip of it. But at one point, Mike Samples came out during the match on commentary, and he starts arguing with Richard Lee, which tends to happen every week as of late. But it did allow this to happen. Let's take a look at what happened as Mike Samples and Richard Lee are arguing from commentary. And keep in mind, folks, there's a match happening over here in the ring to the right of us, but we've just lost track of that altogether.
I'll come over and give you the...
Hey, come on.
Hey, wait a minute.
Look, sneaking up behind Richard Lee here. The Clown Doink the Clown. Come on, Sample.
Wait just a minute.
If there's nothing you can do.
Hey. We're not going to have this out here. Now,
Watch it,
enough
Corey.
of that stuff. Now, we're not going to have that. We'd have enough of that pie throwing and stuff. This is ridiculous, and we're not going to have it out here. Now, no, don't do it. Now, hey, none of that stuff. Don't do it.
All right, Sam.
What are you doing?
Go to break, please.
Awesome, Dave Brown there. He's a little pissed off.
Yeah, I got a little Lance Russell with powder on him in him right there. So here's what we learned from this segment, Ray. Back to what I was talking about before we showed this clip. Chairs being used in the ring is not a disqualification when the Moondogs are in there. It will not stop the match. But what will stop the match? A pie to the face of an announcer shuts the whole damn show down. We got the match just stops.
You gotta be kidding me.
The Moondogs just meander their way out of the ring. They're not mad. They're not attacking anybody. They just kind of walk around there like, what's going on? And Dave's like, just go to break. Disgusting.
The funniest part of that entire segment, that's one I didn't remember. So I was like, man, it would be cool if he hit Corey Maclin instead. And then he did. And I was like, awesome. And the funniest part is Corey Macklin's basically stepping in. All right, now we don't need this going on here. And he's like trying to keep him from hitting Richard Lee with the pie. And then he turns and hits Corey with it. And Richard Lee just runs out of there like, F it. Like, I don't care. Screw you, Corey.
That's what was funny is like Richard Lee didn't care. The Moondogs, like I say, they just kind of meandered over. And then once they seen Richard Lee didn't get hit with the pie, they're like, well, okay. We're chair swinging, maniacs, but he didn't hit our guy. We don't care. And it's like, when we're laying this out, it's like Richard Lee wears suits that clearly came from a thrift store. Corey Maclin actually wears nice looking suits. He's got to be on TV for the rest of the show. But let's smack a pie over Corey Maclin and save Richard Lee's thrift store suit. But I have to say, I was rooting for Corey Maclin to take a pie before it was over. And as soon as he come around from behind the desk, I'm like,
oh, let me step in here for no reason.
Who are you to lay down the law here, Corey? This can't go well. So one little side note here, I just want to ask you, what's your opinion of Richard Lee as a manager? The times you've seen him, however much.
So Richard Lee, like so many before him and so many after him, was I don't want to call him a darling, but he was one of those guys that was showcased like crazy during that period in time. So not getting the USWA, I got the Dallas version up until that ended on ESPN in the summer of 91. And then I didn't see USWA again on my TV until the fall of 94 when they brought it back locally in syndication. So I didn't see Richard Lee in this, in his big primetime run there in Memphis. So I can only go off of the magazines like I did for PG-13 and Brian Christopher, really, because he came during that period. And so you believe the hype, right? You believe Mondo Clean was the next big thing until Damian Demento debuted, right? So, those after mags, they were very powerful things. And so to never see Richard Lee, I was like, oh, this guy must be awesome. Like, you're a kid and I was a kid, young teen. So I'm envisioning how cool this guy is. He's managing the Moondogs. He can handle the Moondogs, whatever. But on TV, I never got it. It was nothing special to me.
No, he wasn't bad, but I felt like I was seeing the same promo every week. And the one criticism I've had of him in recent weeks is like, for the past 2 to 3 weeks in a row, the Harris brothers and Samples and Prentice have beat the ever-loving shit out of him, took and just stomped his arm into a fine powder. And every time I'm thinking, well, he's going to be carried out. He must not, I guess he's going to be off TV for a few weeks. He's up out there cutting a damn promo. As soon as they leave the studio, he's decided he's got his hand on his arm, but he's cutting a damn promo about Monday night.
That John Cena syndrome, man. Quick recovery time.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, I get the Moondogs are supposed to be crazy swamp people or whatever, but what was Richard Lee's excuse to be, just completely invulnerable? But I was just curious to get your take on him, but I didn't
see anything, nothing amazing. It wasn't, the magazines built him up for me to the point where I don't know that he could ever have lived up to the hype that I was expecting when I finally got to see his promos. But at the same time, like you said, it was fine.
Yeah, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't It wasn't good. And I know he was in a weird spot here as a babyface manager too. I mean, the Moondogs were always
that's always the worst.
Been a heel, and
I get why you would want a manager for the Moondogs, babyface or heel. I get it. Makes sense. You need somebody to talk for them, and you also kind of need somebody to quote unquote control them. But at the same time, it's such a bad spot being that babyface manager, unless you're a female. Like they can make it work, but guys, it's very hard for a male to pull that off.
I know we're going back a 2 or 3 episodes here, but has there anything ever been said that was less? You talking about killing your suspension of disbelief? The week that Richard Lee comes up by himself and Mike Samples and company come out and they go, where's your Moondogs? And he's like, they're at the gym. And then they proceed to beat the shit out of him. Like, the Moondogs are at the gym. Like, that's the best we can come up with. Like, okay. Talk about killing their gimmick. So, right now.
They're outside pissing on your hubcaps.
Yeah, that I couldn't believe. Like, yeah, they're out there tearing up your car or whatever they would be doing. But, so as we've seen in doing the Regional Wrestling 1985 episodes, you're not going to see Lawler out here once. You're probably not going to see him out here twice. You're going to see him out here 3, 4, maybe 5 times. So we've heard from a couple of times. Right now, him and Jarrett want to come out here and kind of recap what we've seen out of Doink so far. So let's hear a little bit from the King and old not yet Double J.
I don't know if this cameraman can get a shot of this floor. Can you get a shot, Beth, back here of this? Can we see what now this is just a little bit of what has happened here today. We've had bananas peeled, strewn all over the floor. We've had Wesson oil spilled all over the floor. We've had pies thrown all over the carpet. Now let me tell you something, Mr. Doink the Clown from the World Wrestling Federation. That may be the way that you live in your house, but this ain't the way we live down here in Memphis, Tennessee. We don't throw trash all over the place like that and get away with it. You may come down from your high and mighty Big Apple and think that we are the Beverly Hillbillies, but we're not, pal. And this punk Brian Christopher may have got on the phone and begged you to come down here and try to make fun of us, but you're going to find out real quick we don't take kindly to being made fun of, do we, Jeff? Not exactly. Go ahead. You know, Jerry's out here talking about the WWF, and this is what you're going to send down here, huh, guys? It looks like Jeff Jarrett's not getting one bit of respect, or Jerry Lawler either. Back in August, I made a challenge to Bret Hart when he was Intercontinental Heavyweight Champion. And he accepted my challenge, and now he's the WWF World Heavyweight Champion. And I hadn't heard nothing out of you guys. Jerry Lawler has set the standards in the wrestling world for years. And he takes on all challenges. And they send down Mr. Perfect Kurt Hennig. We found out how perfect he was. Right. And now you're sending down this clown to put with a USWA clown? Well, that's fine. 2 clowns in the ring, and I can promise you one thing. When me and Jerry get through with you, it ain't going to be pie shells or Wesson oil or whatever you want to come out with your little tricks. I know one thing. We know how to use chairs, boards, chains, and we know how to wrestle. So you 2 clowns, just come on down to the Coliseum Monday night.
Chairs, boards, chains, they know how to wrestle.
Glad you caught that. That struck me when I was watching it the first time. I was like, all right, Jeff.
Is there no mops in WMC TV5 studios? I mean, the pie is still out there.
Clearly,
right?
The janitor is off today. He's probably still changing out of his, scorpion or shadow outfit.
Yeah, there you go.
He's wearing back there. But so after that, we go to a commercial break, and when we come back, we get our weekly Mike Samples promo. And so, each week, Richard Lee comes out and he cuts a promo on Mike Samples and the Harris Brothers, and then later Mike Samples comes out and cuts a promo on Richard Lee and the Moondogs. Again, he tells us that Richard Lee shops in a dumpster behind the Salvation Army. Maybe. He then proceeds to tell us how his team will whip the Moon Hogs. And while he will take out Richard Lee, and then we get, the standard screaming promo from one of the Harris brothers. I don't know if it's Ron or Don, but every week it's just one of them that cuts pretty much the same screaming promo. And I'm not knocking these guys, but again, They're about to take on Todd Johnson and Jerry
Oh, my
Turman.
God.
I don't think we need clips of this. I mean, we've got what's become.
Boy, there's a couple clips I would have took. I'll tell you that much.
I mean, normally I would, but if anybody's been watching this show week after week, I mean, we've got just a weekly just beat down, and then this poor Todd Johnson guy seems to be taking the brunt of it almost every week or every other week at the very least. That flip bump on the floor, though.
Yeah, that one spot. You guys go watch this episode of the TV and watch that match. I mean, I know they've just been manhandling these guys every week, and it's just what they've been doing. But there was that point in the match where they go take that guy outside, and they do the one Harris twin whips the job guy into the other one for a backdrop on the studio floor, and it was a normal backdrop, maybe the way you would take it on a studio floor. They weren't happy with that, so they redo the spot, and then this guy tries to play Lee Scott. And he takes this ridiculous backdrop, unbelievable, on the studio floor for absolutely no reason and likely no pay.
Oh, yeah, definitely no pay. But, yeah, it's like somebody told them weeks ago, like, all right, we don't want this Todd Johnson guy to come back. Go out there and make sure he never returns. And then he just keeps returning. And this, like this week was like, all right.
I think they inserted him into this match because I think the Chiron read TD Steele for this match, actually.
It did. They actually had the same opponents listed for this match that ended up wrestling Doink and Brian Christopher in the following match.
They flip-flopped them.
Yeah, I had to.
They were like, we want this kid again.
Yeah, usually I just read the graphic for writing down the names of the people, and then I was like, wait a minute, that's not who's in the ring, because neither one of these guys is TD Steele. So then I was like, it's Todd Johnson. I'm like, they kill this guy. It's like he's the Kenny of like South Park of USWA.
Oh, yeah.
So we come back from another break. It seems like we have a lot of commercial breaks here in Memphis. And we see the PG-13 music video that we saw last week.
Yeah.
And they are on their way, folks. PG-13 will be making their debut in a couple of weeks. And I recently had the chance to interview Wolfie D, and we did a pretty deep dive on the origins of PG-13, specifically this music video, the making of this video, and who wrote the rap and whose idea it was and all that. So it was a really fun interview. Wolfie's a good dude, and he really didn't mind really getting into it and telling us all about how PG-13 came together. So look for that in the coming weeks. We'll be talking to Wolfie, and we also will be talking to JC Ice, Jamie Dundee. So we're going to school you on everything PG-13. So be ready for that. So
nice.
Now,
well, maybe not everything. Well, no, if Jamie's coming on, maybe everything.
Yeah, everything and then some. And then you can decipher for yourself what's true, what's not, and what's appropriate and what's not. And we can guess who's going to say the appropriate stuff and who's going to say the inappropriate stuff.
Yeah, they've come a long way since JC the Ice Baby. That's for sure.
Sure enough, man. So now I guess we're going to call this our TV main event, even though it's featuring, TD Steele and Jimmy Sadler, and that's not a knock on those guys, but with USWA Southern Heavyweight Champion Brian Christopher, as you say, teaming up with Doink the Clown. They're going to have Bert Prentice out there with them, and needless to say, we've got some clips of this match, but I think again, this, just like this whole show has been, a good showcase for Doink the Clown. I think this match was a really good showcase. So let's take a look at a few clips, and I'm looking forward to hearing your kind of analysis of this match on the other side of it.
This is what the Clown did. He's got a flower on. He's squirting people in the face with it.
Oh, yeah, boy, come on.
My goodness.
Squirting the fans.
And that wouldn't have been so bad if it hadn't been for all the other stuff that he's done today.
Hey, get in the ring over there now.
Finally, the referee says, ring the bell. Yeah, come on.
Hey,
leave Corey alone.
We had enough of them out here all day today. Big power move from the Clown that flips TD Steele over. There are a lot of things about this Doink the Clown. Of course, we've seen him wrestle, and he can do that. What's another tough move on TD Steele?
He's got a body scissors. He wrapped his legs around his torso there and able to scissors him and hold him down on the mat. It's not a pin position, but this is one of those holds where you exert a lot of energy.
On the Clown, and he steps in. Clown is a big guy, too, and a big chop on TD still.
Man, you could hear that one all the way across the river.
Boy, he lit TD up with that chop. The Clown. The Clown up on the top rope in there. He's up on the top one and drops down on Tim Sadler.
And Brian Christopher, about as happy as I've seen him in a long time. He's dancing, he's celebrating, he's feeling good.
This Doink the Clown can go.
No doubt about it.
He can go, and he and Christopher make one good tag team, too. I have to add that. But the kind of stuff they use, the tactics they use, the things they do with that, every bit of it's just stepping in the ring with this Clown and Brian Christopher. Look at Doink the Clown. Stretching that left leg of Tim Sadler in there. Boy, is he stretching him.
That's kind of a jackknife almost as he's got that leg pulled up, putting the stretch on the muscles that run down the back of the leg.
Oh, Sadler submits, yeah. Boy, he submits to that hold, but that's a tough hold, and Doink the Clown just holds on to it. TD still run over to try to get.
TD still coming there pushing on Doink's shoulder. Come on, man. Come on, man. Let him go. Let him go.
So, you know, like I say, this match really showcased, you know, what Doink could do. Like, we've seen all the silliness of the clown aspect of his character. But then he shows the fans in Memphis that, you know, he can wrestle. He's a rough character.
He couldn't just work. You know, Matt Borne's so underutilized, but I think a lot of that was his own demons. You know, stories, obviously, his demons, some of them anyway, led to the Road Warriors being created in Georgia, and it goes on and on and on for years after that. Dusty gives him a job as Big Josh from the North Woods in WCW, and he plays that for a while, but as time goes on and they're not using him anymore, he stops playing the character. He's still dressing like Big Josh, but he just comes out there, and if you watch the later matches, he's just killing the job, guys. Like, you've seen that German, nastier ones than that. I mean, the guy could work. I mean, and so... I don't know if you want to call it snug, but I mean, very believable and very aggressive. And that was what was so good about the Doink character was Vince and Pat didn't sit down and say, this is what you're going to do, pal, because they didn't do that back then. They gave you a character and then it was up to you to get it over. And they, you know, he got the Doink character and he went from that happy to that evil face, you know, and you talked about the silly pranks earlier. And then he comes in this match and then he saves himself, right? If you ever question, like, it's just a stupid clown. He's throwing banana peel. Watch this match. I don't want to get in the ring with that clown. And in case anybody's wondering why the bottom rope was broken, Brian Christopher acting a fool in the corner, jumping up and down on the rope, and it just snaps in the middle of the match. Had nothing to do with the wrestling match, just Brian Christopher.
Jumping up and down, snaps the rope. And then so after the match, they attack the guys using the rope, the bottom rope that's broken off, which brings Lawler and Jarrett out there, which, you know, clears the heels out and gets us another setup with those guys. But man, I feel like I know there was extenuating circumstances and Matt Borne ends up leaving and all that. But like I said earlier, if Matt Borne could have avoided his demons that, you know, you alluded to, and they really could have stayed the course with this character and portrayed him in the WWF the way he was portraying it here. Man, there was so much depth to this character. It's like you said, he's then that evil, and it was so it felt so natural and real. You know, he played it so well.
I kind of wonder, you know, because they were turning him face, you know, that was him still doing the bucket of water on Bobby Heenan. So he was turning face. He was cutting those. That's his promos leading into the Survivor Series where we get the freaking Men on a Mission and the Bushwhackers, because those were pre-taped right before, you know, he got suspended with the drug test. And, you know, it's like, okay, you were turning face, but the way they did it with him, it felt like he was still not evil, but he still had that tendency where he's still going to be aggressive and it's still going to, you know, you're definitely going to get good wrestling matches out of him.
Yeah.
And then unfortunately they replaced him with Bam Bam Bigelow's buddy, which is why they wind up feuding. And that guy comes in, and, you know, I'm only covering this because my son just started binge watching Raw from the beginning again. And he was getting through that period. And I watched that Raw and I remembered it because I covered it in that 93 grenade stuff. There's this, like, one of the very first matches with Doink, the new Doink. They bring this guy out there and say, Matt Borne was a wrestler. Get out there and wrestle. They give him an 8-minute squash on Raw to go wrestle. And that's all he does is wrestling moves, mat moves. But it wasn't Matt Borne. Okay, you know how to do moves. The aggressiveness wasn't there. It was, you're right. I mean, it's one of those hindsight characters for me, though. As a kid, I didn't appreciate it as much. I love Matt Borne. I read in a magazine or something that it was Matt Borne, so I liked it. It was fine, but it was still a clown. But when I go back and when I did the grenade, a whole new appreciation for how well he played it.
And I think he played it so well that it was one of those things where the fans were, you know, turning him babyface. But if he would have stayed there, and as you mentioned, the way he was playing it, I think even as a babyface, he was going to stay true to the character, and he would have played it the same way. It'd just been one of those deals where, well, now he's doing these things to people we don't like, so now we're behind it. He's still a crazy son of a bitch, and we don't know what he's going to do, but he's doing it to people we don't like. So
yeah, I don't think we would have ever gotten the Dink stuff or any of that stuff. No. I think it would have been a different route had they still had the original talent. I mean, this Ray Apollo who replaced him, he came out of left field because I didn't really know much about him, and then he gets a job like that. What a cush job you walk into. You're on the pay-per-views and
established character like that. But like you said, it lost everything that Matt Borne had brought to the character. It completely lost. He was just a guy in clown makeup wearing the same outfit, wrestling and doing a laugh. But he didn't have any of the rest of the characteristics, and it went downhill quick. Like it was over.
Luckily, this is so early on, right? This was just 2-3 weeks removed from him beating the crap out of Crush on WWF TV with his arm. He pulled his arm right out of his socket, and he beat him with it. If you listen to Vince, anyway.
Yeah. And so, this to me, I think is probably him coming down here and working a lot of this character out. This is, I don't know how many tapings we're in as far as, that's all that was aired to that point.
He was into it. You have to imagine if they had sent some of them WWF guys that had been long timers there down there and told them, oh, you're going to work 7 out of the 9 segments, they would have scoffed at it. But
nah.
I think Borne was like, okay, let me figure out what I can do. I'm going to do this and do that and see what works. And he did an excellent job.
And so after that match, after they just ran in and made the save, we get another Lawler and Jarrett promo, which more of the same. We don't need to go there. But we get a Doink and Brian Christopher promo. Let's see some highlights of this because, again, this showcases the ebb and flow of Doink throughout the course of this promo, the ups and downs. And let's check this out.
Who is the smartest man in the world, Dave Brown? Tell me, Dave.
I'm not going to say Brian Christopher if that's what you want to hear.
You don't need to call me Brian. Just call me the Brain. Brian the Brain, I like that because I am the smartest man in the world today, along with Doink. I came to Tennessee thinking that everybody had a sense of humor down here, and I find the only people laughing is Brian and myself. I thought all the hillbillies were funny. I used to watch the hillbillies when I was a kid, and I used to laugh. Oh, I used to laugh. And Jerry Lawler, no, let's call him Jed Clampett. And Jarrett, let's call him Jeffro. No.
Ellie Mae. He got the blood out.
He does resemble Ellie Mae a lot. It doesn't appear that they find things too funny. Just trying to have a good time. So in the Mid-South Coliseum this Monday night, boys, you don't know what lurks behind this face. You think I'm all fun and games? Well, I want you to know, I may be laughing on the outside. My smile is only skin deep. If you could see inside, I'm crying. And you might join me for a weep. Monday night in the Mid-South Coliseum. You're not messing with the little boys you've been in here wrestling with. You're wrestling me. And the brains of the Mid-South right here. Oh, Brian, my buddy. So you come prepared, and you will by the end of the night. And I want you to laugh real loud if you can.
Wow.
I mean, that's good stuff. I like this at the beginning, right?
Yeah, you go from the bunny ears to like just a classic. Talk him into the Coliseum promo at the end, and you don't get a lot of whole lot of those outside of Jerry Lawler. He's the one that sells the tickets, but Matt Borne basically cutting a big time promo in the Memphis studio to get the people in there, and I loved that. Was amazing.
Yeah, I'm glad that Lawler had the foresight to let Doink get the last word, because he definitely, for me, if I'd have been on the fence, I'd have been like, oh man, we got to see this. But we'll talk more of that type of talk here in just a moment. Right now, we're going to take our last podcast commercial break, and then we'll let Dave run down the card for Monday night, and then we'll talk about the card, and we'll see how you feel about today's show and if it would have compelled you to go see the card. So let's take a quick commercial break, and then we'll be right back with the card.
Hey guys, Ray Russell here, curator of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, inviting you guys to listen to many of the programs here as part of the WrestleCopia brand, including, but not limited to, the Wrestling Memory Grenade, currently covering the 1988 and the WWF project. You can also listen to the Regional Wrestling Podcast, where we talk the territories, whether it's Jamie Ward with Georgia 81, Roman Gomez with the UWF in 1986, or Gene Jackson covering Memphis in 85. 3 projects going on right now over there at Regional Wrestling. You can also listen to the Wrestling Stoop with the legend himself, Bob Roop. Bob goes back in time each and every week, covering not just his career, but countless stories and interactions with hundreds of wrestling names spanning his 2 decades in the business. But that's not all. You can also check out the Puro Wrestling Academy with the professor of Puro Resu, Mr. Dan Ginnity. Dan and I go back in time and cover the history of Japanese professional wrestling in the English language. And you can listen to all of those shows and more, all part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, located over at WrestleCopia.com. That's WrestleCopia.com, and anywhere your podcast streaming needs are met, from Apple to Spotify, Pocket Cast, and beyond. And while you're at it, why not subscribe to our social media guys for all the latest goings on here at the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Plus, I'm constantly adding old school video clips and pictures from throughout wrestling history. You can follow us over on X, formerly Twitter, at Wrestling Grenade. That's at RASSLIN Grenade. Also, follow and like me, Facebook.com/Wrestling Grenade. And why not subscribe to YouTube.com/Wrestling Grenade. So if you're looking to support that next up-and-coming podcast brand, please consider making it WrestleCopia.
All right, Ray, there we heard a lot about WrestleCopia. We'll talk a little more about it. Before we go. But right now, let's let Dave and Corey let us know what we've got in store down at the Mid-South Coliseum this Monday night.
Number 1 will be going against Chris Michaels, the Masters of Terror. Number 1 against Chris Michaels in the opening match. Then Rock and Roll Phantom will be going against Danny Davis. Danny Davis still looking mighty good, and he will be going against the Phantom in a single match. Boxing match coming up. Gloves will be on. Bert Prentice against Miss Texas. Prentice keeps running his mouth about that Bubba Johnson business. Miss Texas says, I've had enough. I'm going to shut your mouth once and for all. Put the gloves on. Show up Monday night at the Mid-South Coliseum, and that'll be the match. Downtown Bruno is going to be climbing in the ring against Howard Finkel.
Look forward to that one.
After seeing the interview with Finkel, I can understand why Downtown Bruno doesn't like him. I mean, Lawler said you don't like him either, just from what he's been around the WWF. So Howard Finkel will be in here, not in his customary role as a ring announcer, but in the ring, and he will have to face BRUNO-MANIA, Downtown Bruno. What do you say? Didn't have Python who's going to wrap those earthworms around him and make him pay. Downtown Bruno goes against Howard Finkel. Then 6-man tag team action. Moondogs and Richard Lee, all of them in the ring. And you take on the other side Mike Samples, the manager of the Bruise Brothers. Put him together with Ron and Don Harris, and you have got the makings of a wild one. Keep in mind, Samples is looking for a world title match, a return world title match, to try to get the belts back from the Moondogs. Moondog said, you got to put your hair on the line. He said, no. Let's just have a 6-man match. Richard Lee's going to be looking for him. Final match of the night, Jerry Lawler and Jeff Jarrett.
Yeah, I can't wait for this.
Oh, get ready, fans. You know how we're all feeling about Doink the Clown and Brian Christopher. Can you imagine Lawler and Jarrett after they tripped them up over here with the oil, with the banana peels, with all of that, with the insults? Be there for the main event Monday night at the Mid-South Coliseum. It is going to be a big, big match. Jerry Lawler and Jeff Jarrett against Brian Christopher and Doink.
All right, Ray, there you have it. So, this is the time in the show each week where I ask my co-host a few questions. So let's get your take on this. What was your least favorite part of today's show?
Man, it's hard because it was either Doink or the Fink in pretty much every segment that I can recall. It's man, that's a toughie. It might have been the Jarrett squash leading to the Wesson Oil thing that it was like the lamest of the jokes, I thought, anyway. So I'll go with that one, but I don't know that there was. You might mention something different here to me, and I'll go, oh yeah. But off the top of my head, if I had to pick one of those segments, I guess I would go with that one.
I'd say that's fair. I don't usually get asked the question. I always ask the question. Nobody sends it back to me. So since you inferred that, I would say my least favorite part of the show was the Mike Samples promo leading into the Harris Brothers match.
Fair enough. Well, if we can just pick a segment like a half of it, yeah, I'll go with that. Yeah.
That whole segment, because like I say, I'm just kind of over these Harris Brother matches. But like you say, the backdrop fiasco on the floor was something to see, folks. If you want to go to youtube.com/@Retro Wrestling Network and then check out that episode, there'll be a link here wherever you found this podcast. There's a link to the whole episode. If nothing else, go watch that one match because it is for 1993 pre-Extreme Championship Wrestling. It is it's one of the crazier bumps you'll see somebody take.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so the inverse of that, what's your favorite part of today's show?
Oh, man. Again, so many good things. That Doink promo might have sold me, though, I think. I think there was a lot more fun things that happened throughout the show. I certainly enjoyed the Miss Texas Pie spot, and the Bert Prentice comments that you slept with half the locker room and all that stuff. And then, I didn't really, I don't think there's any justification as to what he was doing to her, but it was still like a holy, crap moment where I was like, wow. So that was a hell of a segment, but man, that Doink promo, man, it was next level. I'm not trying to knock on Memphis or the USWA, but it just felt big league, that promo by Doink at the end.
Definitely. And again, it showcased the character because he went through the whole gamut of emotions. He's laughing, he's being silly, and then he gets really serious. And then, he gets the line about have a weep, and he laughs again, and then he brings it right back down again. And it's like, it's up and down, man.
Yeah.
It was awesome. So based on your thoughts on the promo, I probably know the answer to this question, but I got to ask you, this is what we do. If this was actually 1993 and you lived in the Memphis market, would today's show have inspired you to buy a ticket for Monday night's card?
Oh, absolutely. It's like you're entering a whole new world. You got the WWF coming to town, and they're part of the show, and these characters from WWF TV, but all your local guys that I even knew just from ESPN and whatnot. I used to watch Jeff Jarrett down in Dallas, and Lawler, who was a heel working the Dallas stuff, and he was AWA champion. So even if I just moved to town and I knew those names, and Brian Christopher I'd wanted to see forever anyway. So you have all of your main talent in this tag team match, and then they bring Doink to town, which is like, wow, you don't know if you're ever going to see this again. But even the undercard, the mark in me would have loved to have seen Harvey Wippleman, Downtown Bruno versus Howard Finkel. Before they did it to death, with the tuxedo nonsense in the WWF, to see Howard Finkel in a wrestling ring doing something of physical, involvement. Yeah. Sign me up. So I think they did an excellent job.
Yeah. It's like, I've seen this guy ring announce WrestleMania main events, and he's in my local arena wrestling in a match against Downtown Bruno. Like, I've got to be there for this. What in the world is this going to be? So, yeah, I'm right there with you. So, only thing left to do now, let's head down to the Mid-South Coliseum, February 8th, 1993. It's interesting. These last couple of weeks, we've had a few weeks there where we did not have the crowds for the Coliseum. But last week's show with Mr. Perfect Kurt Hennig coming to town, challenging Lawler for the unified title, we had almost 2,100 people in the building, which was up, sadly. From what we had been seeing in recent times. We were like 2,083. This show drew right at 1,000 people. So we're right at half of last week's crowd, which is disappointing for sure. So let's run down.
Wonder
the
if
card.
any of it was weather related.
I don't know if there was a weather issue or if it was, something else going on in town. Who knows?
Car shows in town.
You never know with Memphis, but it's February, so I don't know. Master of Terror #1, which was probably Ken Wayne, defeated Chris Michaels. Nightmare Danny Davis defeated the Rock and Roll Phantom, Don Bass. I'm going to have
the irony of the irony of that match is Danny Davis wrestling a Phantom. You have to wonder if he came out of a box.
And if you don't get that reference, please check out Regional Wrestling 1985 because.
Sorry for the crossover joke.
No, I love it. That's what we want, man. We want everybody to check out. I mean, if you like Memphis in '93, you'll love Memphis in '85. Well, that might not be a fair statement, but check it out. See what you think. Macho Man Randy Savage is there. He'll be here soon too. Spoiler.
For now.
Bert Prentice defeated Miss Texas in the boxing match.
Wow.
So the Bubba Johnson saga is clearly going to live on for another week here. Howard Finkel fought Downtown Bruno to a double disqualification. So even in the manager's ring announcer match, we couldn't come to a clean finish. Good old Memphis.
Howard Finkel is not to do jobs, pal.
Yeah, I'll send him down there, but he's not putting over Harvey Wippleman, pal. Mike Samples and Ron and Don Harris defeated Richard Lee and the Moondogs, which would lead us to believe Richard Lee had his head shaved. They don't state that, but that was the stipulation. So surely they made good on the stipulation, being Memphis. But keep in mind, folks, I mean, a lot of people were upset with me because I raised such a stink last week that 5 out of 7 matches ended in DQs. Apparently I shouldn't have criticized that, but,
okay.
Now, before we tell the result of the main event, I do want to circle back to one thing. This just bugged me when I read the results. And it's not because it's Danny Davis. I love Nightmare Danny Davis. I grew up a big Nightmare Danny Davis fan in Continental and Memphis. My co-host, Josh Briley, is his nephew.
Right.
But last week, Jeff Jarrett, who's been a bona fide main eventer here in USWA, he's been Southern Heavyweight Champion up until just a couple of weeks ago, beat the Rock and Roll Phantom by disqualification. And this week he's in the main event. But Nightmare Danny Davis straight up beat the Rock and Roll Phantom in the second match this week. We couldn't have just had Jeff Jarrett beat him last week and not do one of 5 DQs? Anyway. Yeah. I don't expect you to have an answer for that. That's a rhetorical question.
It's Memphis, pal.
That's all you can say. It really is. I mean, how many times have we said that in the regional wrestling podcast? And because I mean, I've told everybody for years, like, oh, Memphis is like one of my favorite promotions. It was so awesome. And I mean, you can tell everybody.
Are we
like,
still doing the bicycle? Are we still doing the bicycle
here
in '93?
I think we are. I think we're still bicycling this dude because I was there for a few weeks. I stopped doing it because it felt redundant. Like every week they would do Memphis TV, and then they would leave Memphis, drive to Nashville, and do last Monday night's card in Nashville on Saturday night before coming back to Memphis on Monday and doing this week's card. So they were still a week behind in all the other cities. So that was still a thing all the way in '93. I think all the way up. I don't think that changed until like the Power Pro days. I think all the way through USWA that was the case.
I didn't mean to cut you off. You said I said something off air or something like that.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that I know people are sick of me hearing me say this, and I've said this to you off air many times. It's like, I have all this love for Memphis wrestling, but like me and you started digging into '85, and we're getting these cards where, half the, 4 out of 5 matches are DQs. We're getting DQs in Texas death matches. We got Phantom title changes and just a lot of weird stuff going on. But anyway, it's going to get better. I have faith. Keep watching and listening, folks. It's got to get better, right? Absolutely. So it's not getting better right now, though. But we'll find out why. So our main event that we've been building towards. Jerry the King Lawler and Jeff Jarrett versus Brian Christopher and Doink the Clown.
What a main event.
Did not take place in the form that we thought it would, because Brian Christopher is allegedly injured. So Jerry Lawler and Jeff Jarrett defeated Doink the Clown and Jeff Gaylord.
Oh, not that guy.
When Jarrett pinned Doink the Clown. So, I mean, that can't attribute to the house being down, because we didn't know Brian wasn't there until right before the match happened. But, oh my gosh, like, I mean, honestly, from a work rate standpoint, if I'm booking the card, Rock and Roll Phantom Don Bass would have tagged with Doink the Clown, and Danny Davis could have beat Jeff Gaylord in the second match. That's just me. But he's a better worker.
Yeah, there's got to be somebody on there you could have slapped in that spot.
Bert Prentice. I mean, Howard Finkel. I don't know, like anybody but Jeff Gaylord. So,
yeah.
But we, you know, apparently we had agreed on the front end that Doink was coming to town and Doink was going to do the JOB, and he did it for Jarrett, to his credit, you know. So, so that was our main event. I guess the only thing I can figure is, I guess Brian must have got hurt on the Saturday night Nashville show, because he was fine on TV. So I guess when they left,
the lingering effects of slipping on the oil, perhaps.
Could be that maybe he hurt his ankle when he did those Kevin Sullivan gut stomps to that poor enhancement guy on TV. I forgot to mention those when we got through watching the videos.
Yeah,
the old Sullivan there, but. Yeah. Anyway, he had to have either gotten injured in Nashville or whatever little spot show they did that Sunday night. But anyway, it leads to Jeff Gaylord teaming with Doink the Clown.
Right.
And, I'm sure Doink wasn't thrilled either. But anyway, we had our first, you know, 2 big WWF stars. I mean, yes, we had Mr. Perfect here last week, but you know, we've had our fair share of Kurt Hennig in Memphis over the years, so that didn't feel quite as unique as it was to have a character born, bred, and invented in the WWF like Doink the Clown.
Right.
And who's more of a WWF lifer than Howard Finkel, you know. So I'm sure it had to be disappointing for, you know, Lawler and everybody to be like, oh, damn, we brought somebody fresh off WWF TV and our house, you know, was half what it was last week. But
yeah, that's crazy, man.
We're not giving up, though. We got more to come from the WWF here in the USWA.
Oh, yeah. So, it's going to go on for quite a while.
Oh, yeah. So we are going to stay positive, and things are going to continue to get better, and we're going to have fun with it no matter what. And, man, it's been fun. It's been fun having you here this week, Ray. Thank you for tagging in. I know
what a great episode to be part of.
I was going to say, I know that, you know, you had kind of had it in the back of your head that if you were going to jump in on one, this was one you wanted to jump in on. It's definitely one I wanted you to jump in on. Of course, before we go, remember our usual co-hosts, P3 Radio. You can check out their show. Even though they're out of town, they pre-recorded some shows, so it's still going on each week. So wherever you enjoy podcasts, you can put in the letter P, the number 3 radio. You can find them there. Of course, we are on Facebook at facebook.com/retro wrestling review. We're also on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at USWA Podcast. We have a store with all sorts of t-shirts and whatnot, tinyurl.com/USWA Podcast. If you'd like to send me an email because you have some inside information on something to do with the show, and I've got some really great stuff. People have hit me up both on Facebook and in the email with some fun stories, some anecdotes,
nice,
some things that now I have to just wait for us to get there before I can talk about it. But yeah, anything. And if you want to be like, hey Gene, why are you being a dick and getting mad about 5 disqualifications on one show? What's wrong with that, dude? Email USWApodcast@outlook.com and we can have a discussion.
That's crazy. That's crazy considering how much people complain about today. They're giving you grief about complaining about something from 30 plus years ago.
Yeah, well, you know, it's never too late to complain, Ray. We know that's true. And last but certainly not least, WrestleCopia.com. We are proud to be a member of the WrestleCopia brand, the WrestleCopia family, the WrestleCopia community, if you will. And as you heard mentioned in the commercial earlier, Ray told us a little bit about some of the different podcasts you can hear. But since we have you here, Ray, tell the folks all that they can get if they join the WrestleCopia Patreon.
Oh my God. Yes. Patreon.com/WrestleCopia. That address again, patreon.com/WrestleCopia. We got that $5 all access tier, Gene. You know all about that one. All the insanely detailed show notes, early access to all the shows. They drop sometimes a few days early, sometimes a week early, depending on the podcast and when we can get it edited and out. I mean, random bonus video drops, digital downloads, great stuff you guys can view and read there. At least a dozen every month. I try to do more than that. Lots of, I'm sure I'm forgetting things in between, and then we've added another tier as well, the deluxe tier, where, we're going to be doing a lot more video casts. WrestleMania 4 we put out on the all access tier just to give everybody kind of a taste of what it's going to be like. You were part of that, Gene, as part of the WrestleMania 4 2-part watch along. We had a great time doing the video cast of that, and so many other great things. More great show notes, including yours, as part of that deluxe tier for the Retro Wrestling Review show, as well as Dan Ginnity's Pro Wrestling Academy show notes. And yeah, just lots of great stuff over at Patreon. Continues to grow. Lots of stuff added. And of course, we've got 7 current shows going up every week right now for the WrestleCopia Podcast Network, but more on the horizon, believe it or not, guys. We're working on something for the Portland territory. The Monday Warfare Battles Within Raw vs. Nitro podcast will return with a new co-host, so lots going on, and you don't want to miss it.
So much. I dare you, folks. I dare you to find anybody who offers more value for what you pay for the Patreon than WrestleCopia. Ray puts out so much great stuff. I mean, for me, it's worth the $5 just for those digital downloads of the magazines from my childhood.
Oh, they're great
stuff. I don't have to go dig out of the closet in my parents' house. They're 4 hours away from here. They're just right there on my phone or on my computer, wherever I see them. Where else could you see me and Ray Russell talking about Grunt the Wrestling movie on a video?
Yeah, I forgot about that one. Yeah.
Come on, y'all. You got to check that out. That was a lot of fun. So
good stuff, yeah.
There you go.
Oh, he kicked his head off.
I think that's where we missed the boat. We needed Lance Russell to call the scene where the decapitation happened. Oh, come on, Jerry. Don't kick his head off in there.
He's gotten up from far worse than this.
That is the line of the movie. That's the best line of any movie, honestly. I mean, you can't top that. But all right, folks. But like I said, we have a lot of fun here on Retro Wrestling Review, and I try to do a lot of research and try to give you some insight into who some of these people are and give you a little background. But some of these other podcasts, especially Dan Ginnity's, the Japan podcast, if you really want to learn the history, if you want a history lesson that's fun in the process, but also very, very informative, check that out, because you're not going to find a podcast anywhere else where you're going to learn more about the history of Japanese wrestling than you are right there. And I'm excited about this Portland wrestling podcast because it's one of the territories I don't know a lot about. So Ray goes to great depths to study this stuff himself, to be knowledgeable himself, but for the things that he doesn't know or he's still learning, he goes out and finds the most knowledgeable people he can find, such as Dan Ginnity, such as so many of the other people that you hear on the WrestleCopia network. So don't just listen to our silly shit here. Go check out some of the other stuff at WrestleCopia, and you'll want to join the Patreon, I'm sure. So again, Ray, thank you so much for joining us, man.
Absolutely, man.
It was
been my pleasure.
Look forward to having you here again in the future, and we look forward to seeing you here next week for episode 7